When 32-year-old tech mogul Bradley Morrison collapsed in his penthouse dining room, gasping for air with his face turning blue, the most expensive medical alert system money could buy was useless. His personal physician was unreachable. The closest hospital was 15 minutes away. But Elena Rodriguez, the night cleaning lady who barely spoke English and earned minimum wage, possessed something that all of Bradley's wealth couldn't buy: the knowledge that would save his life in the next 4 minutes. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Bradley Morrison had everything a man could want and absolutely nothing he actually needed. At 32, he was worth $2.3 billion thanks to the revolutionary social media platform he developed straight out of MIT. His Manhattan penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a 70-story building with panoramic views that stretched from Central Park to the Hudson River. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a world that looked like a miniature toy set from his height, where ordinary people lived ordinary lives he'd long forgotten how to relate to. The penthouse itself was a marvel of modern architecture and technology. Smart systems controlled everything from the temperature to the lighting with voice commands. A private elevator opened directly into his foyer, past security that required 3 different biometric scans. His kitchen boasted appliances that cost more than most people's cars, and his wine cellar held bottles worth more than entire homes. Yet despite all this luxury, Bradley Morrison was profoundly, devastatingly alone. His typical day began at 4:30 a.m. with a protein smoothie prepared by his automated kitchen system. By 5 a.m., he was in his private gym working out with a personal trainer who came and left without unnecessary conversation. His meals were delivered by high-end catering services, his clothes selected by a personal stylist, his schedule managed by a team of assistants who communicated with him primarily through digital interfaces. Human interaction had become a scheduled commodity in Bradley's life, measured in billable hours and contractual obligations. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd built his fortune creating a platform designed to connect people while becoming increasingly disconnected from humanity himself. SocialSphere had 3 billion active users worldwide, all seeking connection, community, and understanding through the algorithms he designed. Yet Bradley himself hadn't had a genuine conversation with another human being in months. His last relationship had ended 2 years earlier when his girlfriend, a successful attorney, told him she felt like she was dating a very wealthy ghost. His family relationships had withered along with his social connections. His parents, retired professors living quietly in Vermont, called once a month with conversations that felt increasingly strained and artificial. They'd grown uncomfortable with their son's wealth and the way it had transformed him from the curious, empathetic young man they'd raised into someone they barely recognized. His younger sister, a teacher in Oregon, had stopped returning his calls after their last argument about money. She'd accused him of thinking that every problem could be solved by writing a check, and he'd been unable to convince her otherwise, because, deep down, he believed she was right. The penthouse reflected his isolation in its pristine, untouched perfection. Despite its enormous size, Bradley only used a few rooms regularly. The formal dining room, designed to seat 24 guests, served as his workspace when he wanted a change of scenery from his office. The living room, decorated by an award-winning interior designer with furniture that belonged in museums, remained largely unused except for photographers came for magazine features about successful entrepreneurs and their lifestyle choices. His bedroom, a master suite that was larger than most apartments, felt more like a luxury hotel room than a home. The bed, custom-made and costing more than some people's annual salaries, was where he spent countless sleepless nights scrolling through SocialSphere, watching other people live the connected lives he'd helped make possible, but couldn't seem to create for himself. The massive walk-in closet contained hundreds of pieces of designer clothing, most with tags still attached, because Bradley had lost interest in appearances beyond what was required for business meetings and public appearances. Most telling was his kitchen, a culinary wonderland equipped with every conceivable modern convenience and gadget, professional-grade ovens, a built-in espresso system that cost more than a luxury car, refrigerators that could house a week's worth of food for a large family. Yet Bradley rarely cooked, rarely even opened the refrigerator himself. Everything was prepared, delivered, or handled by staff members who came and went like ghosts, maintaining his lifestyle while remaining invisible in his daily experience. The cleaning service was scheduled for late evenings when Bradley was typically in his home office, managing the 24-hour global demands of running a tech empire. He'd chosen this arrangement deliberately, preferring to not have people around during the day when he was trying to work or think. The cleaners were instructed to be thorough but unobtrusive, to restore his environment to perfection without disrupting his routine or requiring any interaction. This carefully constructed isolation had served Bradley well in building his business empire. Without the distractions of relationships, social obligations, or emotional complications, he could focus entirely on growth, innovation, and profit maximization. He told himself that this was temporary, that once social sphere reached certain milestones, or once he'd achieved specific financial goals, he would reconnect with the world and rebuild the human connections he'd sacrificed for success. But as weeks turned to months and months turned to years, Bradley found himself trapped in a routine that felt increasingly hollow. Success had become its own prison, luxury had replaced genuine comfort, and efficiency had eliminated spontaneity, warmth, and human unpredictability from his existence. He was a man who had everything and felt nothing, surrounded by objects of incredible value, while being invaluable to no one in any personal, meaningful way.
The penthouse, for all its beauty and sophistication, had become less a home than a very expensive monument to isolation. A place where Bradley Morrison lived alone with his achievements, his regrets, and the growing realization that he'd optimized his life so perfectly that he'd optimized away everything that made life worth living. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Bradley's health had been deteriorating for months, though he'd been masterful at ignoring the signs. The stress of managing a global tech empire, combined with his increasingly isolated lifestyle, had created a perfect storm of physical and mental health issues that money couldn't solve and pride wouldn't let him acknowledge. The first red flag had appeared during a board meeting 6 months earlier. Bradley was presenting quarterly growth projections when he suddenly felt lightheaded and had to grip the conference table to steady himself. His CFO, Margaret Chen, had noticed his pale complexion and suggested he see a doctor, but Bradley had brushed it off as exhaustion from working 18-hour days. "I'll sleep when we go public with the new AI integration," he joked, though nobody in the room had laughed. His eating habits had become increasingly erratic as social sphere's demands grew more intense. Bradley often went entire days consuming nothing but protein shakes and energy drinks, working through meals and forgetting to eat until his assistant would text him reminders at 9 p.m. When he did eat, it was usually while reviewing code or analyzing user engagement metrics, his attention divided between sustenance and spreadsheets. The irony was that Bradley's penthouse kitchen was stocked with the finest organic foods money could buy. His nutritionist, Dr. Amanda Foster, had created detailed meal plans designed to optimize cognitive function and energy levels. She'd personally selected everything from grass-fed beef to exotic superfoods, creating a dietary regime that should have supported peak human performance. But the most perfect meal plan in the world was useless if nobody followed it. Bradley's relationship with food had become purely transactional. Eating was fuel, nothing more. He'd lost the ability to taste, to savor, to enjoy the simple pleasure of a well-prepared meal. Everything was consumed hastily, mechanically, while his mind remained focused on algorithms, market strategies, and competitive analysis. He ate the same way he did everything else in his life, efficiently, without joy, and completely alone. His personal physician, Dr. Robert Harrison, had been growing increasingly concerned during their quarterly checkups. Bradley's blood pressure was elevated, his stress hormones were through the roof, and his weight had dropped 15 pounds over the past year. "You're running your body like a machine, Bradley," Dr. Harrison had warned during their last appointment. "But machines need maintenance, and you're overdue for some serious repairs." The doctor had recommended a comprehensive health evaluation, including specialists for cardiology, gastroenterology, and mental health. He'd even offered to coordinate everything through his concierge medical practice, making the process as seamless and private as possible. But Bradley had postponed each appointment, claiming urgent business matters that couldn't wait. There was always another crisis, another opportunity, another reason why his health had to take a back seat to his empire's growth. Sleep had become another casualty of Bradley's relentless pursuit of success. His bedroom, designed to be a sanctuary of rest and relaxation, had been transformed into a secondary office. Multiple monitors displayed real-time analytics from around the globe, allowing him to track Social Sphere's performance in different time zones. The custom blackout curtains remained drawn most days, not for better sleep, but to reduce glare on his screens. When Bradley did sleep, it was restless and interrupted. He'd wake up at 2 a.m. to check Asian markets, respond to emails from European partners, or review code changes made by his development teams in India. His sleep patterns had become as fragmented as his eating habits, with 4-hour power naps replacing the restorative 8-hour nights his body desperately needed. The warning signs extended beyond physical symptoms. Bradley's decision-making, once sharp and intuitive, had become increasingly erratic. He'd cancel important meetings at the last minute, make impulsive strategic decisions without consulting his leadership team, and obsess over minor details while ignoring major operational issues. His assistant, Jennifer Walsh, had learned to double-check every directive and gently suggest postponing major decisions when Bradley seemed particularly unfocused. His communication style had also changed dramatically. The eloquent, charismatic leader that had once inspired thousands of employees and investors had become curt, impatient, and disconnected. Video conferences that should have lasted an hour were cut short after 15 minutes. Strategic planning sessions were reduced to rapid-fire decision points with no discussion or collaboration. Bradley was still brilliant, but his brilliance had become cold, mechanical, and increasingly isolated from human input. The most telling symptom was his complete loss of awareness regarding his own vulnerability. Bradley had surrounded himself with so many safety nets, backup systems, and protective measures that he'd begun to believe he was invincible. His penthouse had the most advanced security system available, his finances were managed by the best wealth management firm in the world, his legal team could handle any crisis, and his PR firm could manage any reputation issue. But all of these protections were external. They could guard against business threats, financial risks, and public relations disasters. They couldn't protect against the slow breakdown of his own body and mind, the accumulation of stress and neglect that was eating away at his foundation from within. Bradley had become so focused on optimizing every external variable that he'd forgotten the most important system of all, himself. The night of the incident, Bradley had been particularly stressed about a competitor's announcement regarding artificial intelligence integration. A rival platform had unveiled features that closely resembled Social Sphere's upcoming release, raising questions about industrial espionage and forcing Bradley's team into crisis mode. He'd spent the day in emergency strategy sessions, speaking with patent attorneys and analyzing the competitive implications of this development. By evening, Bradley was running on pure adrenaline and caffeine. He'd consumed 6 espressos, 2 energy drinks, and a handful of supplements designed to enhance focus and cognitive performance. His last meal had been a protein bar eaten hastily during a brief break between conference calls. His stomach was empty, His blood sugar was unstable, and his nervous system was overstimulated to a dangerous degree. The premium steak dinner that would trigger the choking incident had been ordered not for pleasure or nourishment, but as fuel for another all-night work session. Bradley had planned to eat quickly while reviewing legal documents, then spend the night developing a response strategy to his competitor's announcement. It was just another task to be completed efficiently, another box to be checked off his endless list of responsibilities. He had no way of knowing that his depleted physical state, combined with his habit of eating while distracted, was about to create a life-threatening emergency that no amount of wealth or technology could prevent. At exactly 9:47 p.m., Bradley Morrison's world changed forever. He had just taken an oversized bite of the premium ribeye steak while simultaneously reviewing a crucial patent document on his tablet. The meat, perfectly cooked but hastily consumed, lodged directly in his throat. Within seconds, his airway was completely blocked. The choking began silently, as it often does. Bradley's first instinct was embarrassment rather than panic. Surely he could handle this himself. He tried to cough, but no sound emerged. He tried to swallow, but nothing moved. The piece of steak remained stubbornly fixed, creating an impenetrable seal that prevented any air from reaching his lungs. Elena Rodriguez had been cleaning the guest bathroom down the hall when she heard a chair scrape violently against the hardwood floor. Then came a sound that made her blood run cold, the desperate, voiceless gasping of someone who couldn't breathe. She'd heard that sound before, 12 years ago in Guatemala, when her younger brother had choked on a piece of mango at their family dinner. Racing toward the dining room, Elena found Bradley standing beside his chair, his face already turning from red to purple. His eyes were wide with terror as the reality of his situation hit him. His hands clutched at his throat in the universal sign of choking, but there was no one around to understand the signal, except Elena. "Señor Morrison," she called out, but Bradley was beyond responding. His legs began to wobble as oxygen deprivation started affecting his brain. Elena knew she had less than 2 minutes before permanent brain damage would begin, and perhaps 4 minutes before death would be inevitable. While most people in Elena's position might have panicked or called 911, she possessed something far more valuable in that critical moment: training. 8 years earlier, after Elena's brother's near-fatal choking incident, Elena had enrolled in an advanced first aid course offered through her local community center in Queens. She'd spent her own money, taken time off from her second job, and studied with the dedication of someone who never wanted to feel helpless again. The course was comprehensive, covering everything from basic CPR to advanced airway management. She'd practiced the Heimlich maneuver hundreds of times on training dummies, learned to recognize different types of airway obstructions, and even studied the anatomical differences that could complicate rescue attempts. Her instructor, a retired paramedic named Marcus Washington, had emphasized that technique and confidence were more important than physical strength in emergency situations. "The body wants to live," he taught the class. "Your job is just to help it remember how." Elena's hands moved with practiced precision. She positioned herself behind Bradley, who was now swaying dangerously. Her arms wrapped around his torso just below his ribcage. Her hands formed the proper position, one fist with the thumb side against his abdomen, the other hand grasping the fist. The placement was critical. Too high and she might break his ribs. Too low and the compressions would be ineffective. "I am going to help you," she said in English, though she doubted Bradley could hear her anymore. His face was now blue, and his movements were becoming uncoordinated as oxygen deprivation affected his motor functions. Elena's first abdominal thrust was firm and upward, designed to create a sudden increase in pressure that would dislodge the obstruction. Nothing happened. Bradley's body was beginning to go limp, and Elena knew she was running out of time. She adjusted her position, ensuring her arms were properly placed, and delivered a second thrust with more force. Still nothing. This was the moment when most people would panic, when the fear of causing injury would override the knowledge that action was necessary. But Elena's training had prepared her for exactly this scenario. Marcus had taught them that choking emergencies often require multiple attempts. that persistence and proper technique would eventually succeed if applied correctly and without hesitation. The third thrust was different. Elena put her entire body weight behind it, lifting Bradley slightly off the ground as she compressed his diaphragm upward with maximum force. The pressure change was immediate and dramatic. The piece of steak shot out of Elena's throat like a cork from a champagne bottle, landing on his designer dining table with a wet thud.
Bradley collapsed to his knees, gasping and coughing as air rushed back into his lungs. The sound of his breathing, ragged, desperate, but gloriously present, filled the silent penthouse. Color began returning to his face as oxygen reached his brain again. Elena knelt beside him, her hand on his back, speaking softly in a mixture of English and Spanish as she helped him regulate his breathing. "Breathe slowly, senor," she coached. "Small breaths. Your body needs time to remember." For several minutes, neither of them spoke beyond Elena's gentle encouragements. Bradley remained on his knees, overwhelmed not just by the physical trauma of nearly dying, but by the profound realization that his life had been saved by someone he'd never even properly noticed before. Elena Rodriguez, the quiet woman who cleaned his home 3 times a week, had possessed the knowledge and courage to act when every expensive security system and medical alert device in his penthouse had been useless. As Bradley's breathing stabilized, he looked up at Elena with tears in his eyes. "You saved my life," he whispered, his voice hoarse from the trauma to his throat. Elena smiled gently. "Senor Marcos, he teach me this. He say, we never know when someone need help." She helped Bradley to his feet and guided him to the living room sofa, bringing him water and staying close to monitor his condition. The transformation in Bradley Morrison began in that moment. Sitting on his expensive sofa, drinking water handed to him by a woman whose name he was ashamed to admit he'd never bothered to learn properly. The near-death experience had stripped away every layer of pretense, every barrier he'd built between himself and genuine human connection. "Elena," he said, testing her name for perhaps the first time, "how did you know what to do?" As Elena told him about her brother's choking incident, about the first aid classes she'd taken at her own expense, about her determination to never feel helpless in an emergency again, Bradley felt something shift inside him. This woman, who earned in a year what he made in hours, had invested her time and money in knowledge that could help others. She'd prepared for a crisis that might never come, armed herself with skills that served no purpose except to potentially save lives. The conversation continued for 2 hours. Elena told Bradley about her family in Guatemala, her dreams of becoming a nurse, the night school classes she attended after her cleaning shifts. Bradley shared things he hadn't spoken about in years: his loneliness, his fears about the company, his growing awareness that success without connection was just elaborate isolation. When Elena finally prepared to leave that night, Bradley asked her something that would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. "Would you like to have dinner here tomorrow? A real dinner, where we both sit and eat and talk?" Elena's smile was radiant. "Si, Signor Bradley, I would like that very much." 6 months later, Bradley Morrison's life was unrecognizable. Elena had become not just his friend, but his mentor in the art of living meaningfully. With her encouragement, he'd enrolled in first aid classes himself, volunteered at a community center in Queens, and begun learning Spanish. He'd restructured his company to prioritize employee well-being and work-life balance, instituting policies that prevented the kind of self-destructive patterns that had nearly killed him. Most importantly, he'd learned that true wealth wasn't measured in billions of dollars or square footage of penthouse space, but in the connections we build, the knowledge we share, and the willingness to help others when they need us most. Elena Rodriguez had saved more than his life that night. She'd saved his humanity. The penthouse still overlooked the same Manhattan skyline, but now it was filled with laughter, conversation, and the warmth of genuine friendship. Bradley had discovered that the most valuable things in life couldn't be purchased, only earned through authenticity, compassion, and the courage to open one's heart to others. Elena's simple act of preparation, learning first aid to help others, had not only saved Bradley's life, but transformed it completely. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with someone who cares enough to learn how to help, and someone else who's humble enough to accept that help when it's offered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.